Hello. In the name of the Porto Business School and in our name, of course, welcome to the webinar Sustainable Innovation Through Design Thinking. In our three-person dialogue, because we are three, obviously, we will explore the intersection of design thinking and sustainability, highlighting its transformative power in creating environmentally responsible and socially conscious solutions. So that's what it is about. So if you are interested in this, please stay with us. So who we are, or who are we, better. This is Tiago Nunes, you see his name there, and me, Katja Chimmel. We are both the co-directors of a new open executive program, Design Thinking for Sustainability. About us, very short, we are both pre-academic, so we are both teaching in different higher educational institutions, but we also both are applying design thinking in organizational contexts. Tiago is doing it more in the south of Portugal and abroad. I know, Tiago, in the context of the company with company. Tiago is the co-founder, and me more in north of Portugal, but also abroad. At the moment, actually, you see me in Constance in a hotel in the breakfast room, and I'm representing here, obviously, the Porto Business School, but also from the consultancy Mindshake. So this very shortly, Tiago, would you like to present our guest speaker, Lawrence?
Of course, and thank you for the introduction, Katja. So yeah, would like to welcome also our guest, Lawrence Abrahamson. He's a former director at D4 Design Thinking and Culture. We've met a long way ago. He's also an expert in human-centered design. So again, thank you for Lawrence for being here. And yeah, I will start by asking you, what's your perspective on design thinking, and how you see its relevancy for any kind of organization?
Sure. So I think, as you mentioned, I led the design thinking and culture team at D4, and our goal was to spread the behaviors and the ways of working of human-centered design throughout the enterprise. And I think Ford at that time really recognized design thinking and human-centered design as a strategic asset and strategic process for the company, because it helped individuals work across departments, work with each other, collaborate, come up with new ideas, innovate. And so it's really important to bring this into an organization, because suddenly you can start to work in new ways, explore new ideas, and have different types of conversations. So I think those are the main components that design thinking and human-centered design can really bring to an organization.
Nice. And how many were you, like, in let's say in that direction, like in terms of like for the organization? Like, it's huge, right? So just also to get.
Yeah, so the Ford organization is 190,000 individuals. We were a team of 20 and 25, but our goal was to reach out and create curriculums around design thinking, new ways of working, really creative problem solving, and through that spread these ways of working through the organization. We also coach teams, not within the design lab of D4 and with vehicles, but we coach teams in procurement, in talent, in manufacturing, and bringing these methods and techniques into the everyday challenges. Realizing that it's one thing to create learning experiences that people can take online or self-paced, but we saw the sort of the coaching component as really being important, a practical application of those lessons, because that's where really you see results. We're actually impacting the work of the company, and you're learning through doing and not just taking that course. So you really are able to bring it into practice and make it real for yourself and your team.
Mm-hmm. So here I have a curiosity. Actually, how would you explain the fundamental difference between the design thinking method, because we speak about the method, and the design thinking mindset, and that in this organizational structure you have been working?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good thing to consider, is that there's a method and there's an approach, and there's a way of teaching it so individuals can understand that. We talk about it very much in a linear process, but it isn't necessarily that linear. And so I think the methods are really important to learn and to prototype and to test and to absorb and embody that, and understand what are the goals for each one of these processes, the activities, for each one of those things. So that's the method. Then the mindset, and this is actually over the time at D4, the years after we were able to raise awareness, convey the methods, we started moving much more to what is the mindset we want everyone to take. It's almost the fundamental behaviors of collaboration, of asking questions, of sharing your ideas in a more tangible way through prototypes. And so I think the mindset is almost the ultimate goal, where you just embody it. It almost becomes design thinking as lifestyle. I think as a designer, I would hope I am bringing that sort of mindset. Everything I do is now channeling through this approach of learning, imagining, and then building. But methodology is a way to get to that fundamental mindset.
So how does adopting a design thinking mindset impact actually the overall culture and work environment within the organization?
Yeah, I mean, once you're into the mindset, these fundamental ways of working, collaboration becomes a much more open conversation. I'm not holding ideas within my mind and trying to talk about them, but we're maybe gathered around a whiteboard or gathered around a prototype. We're sharing ideas tangibly and visually. There's nothing, harder than trying to describe what's in my head versus showing it in some manner. And that could be a physical prototype, but it also could be a written document. It could be an Excel sheet. One of the things that we really want to make sure is that, especially in a large organization, everyone works in different ways. And these behaviors that we're trying to talk about are really about asking, how do you be creative, problem solve in your own discipline, in your own industry? And what are those tools and techniques to share ideas? So once a team is doing that, suddenly you have a very different meeting, you have a very different conversation, because we're looking at something and reacting to it. We've gone out and we've talked to the users, whoever those individuals are, and we're actually making decisions based on insights, based on facts, and not my own personal research. And so what we are really excited about from a from a mindset standpoint is suddenly everyone is collectively working together on a clear problem. We know what the subject is, we know what the question that we're trying to answer is, and then we can apply our creative problem solving skills to that.
Yeah, and all of that takes time, right? Like something that sometimes I feel that organizations kind of they expect they want to innovate, right? They want to be able to look to their products and services with a constructive perspective and try to develop new things. But many times I feel, that there's like these mismatch of expectations in terms of the time and effort that it actually requires, right? And that's the thing, it's not just about applying a certain approach or process. There's like a fundamental, also knowledge that you need to build, right? And you mentioned that, right? Like talking with people, with the users, with people we are designing for ultimately. Can you also elaborate a little bit on this, how, from your experience, how sometimes organizations also manage this expectation of execution of this type of projects and also the results?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of the things that we battle against. There's a few myths of design thinking. One of the myths that we battle against is, it's going to take more time. But then the challenge is it does take more time in the beginning. And so because you are, ensuring that we know what the question that we're answering, what is the challenge at hand? Is this actually the challenge? And then to your point, doing some design research, really understanding what are users' point of view, what are their pain points. But that additional time is upfront, but that will enable us to move much quicker. You know, we talk about going slow to go fast. And so this preparatory work up in the front, the really sound research and conversations you're having will allow you to ensure that the work you're doing is actually going to be the work that needs to be done. It helps risk-proof. And therefore, you go through the process, you're sharing ideas, you're prototyping, you're still doing the work throughout all those processes. You're just doing it in a way that you're validating along the way. And so overall, the time, I would argue, would be less because we're avoiding the mistakes, we're avoiding coming back at the end, we're avoiding sort of a project or a deliverable or a solution that actually doesn't work, adding only more time and more cost. And so I think it's really about having a bigger picture of that return on investment.
Yeah, actually, in my experience, the empathy phase is where you put more effort and more work, and sometimes actually it shows that the project has to take another direction or even have to stop. But this is very difficult to communicate this to organizations, isn't it? Yeah, and in general, it gives a lot of work, and people, I don't know why, they don't like it so much to really look deeper to the user, to speak with, go out of the building and speak with people, look at them. And this is something which most people in organizations are still not really used to and understand the value of it.
Definitely. They're definitely not used to it. I think once they see it and do it, it's like eye-opening because suddenly everyone can see the problem. And as we're all naturally creative, natural problem solvers, as soon as you see the problem, the ideas, the conversation starts. So it's more about just, hey, let's do it. Let's try it and see what happens.
Exactly. And also curiosity, because I mean your experience, right, also goes way beyond from D4 as well. And in terms of what has been like, let's say, fields of application of this approach and type of projects. I mean, it's not just product, right? It's not just product design. It's not just service design. Like, I think it could be interesting for people that are watching also to understand what can be the level of, let's say, application of this approach, methodologies, and you know how organizations and other organizations are also looking to design thinking.
Yeah, I mean, once you get into the mindsets, the curiosities, you can really start to apply that to any challenge, any industry. And it's really just about, as you go in, how are you asking questions and how are you starting to be aware of the entire ecosystem that you're going to be entering. So it can be organizational change, it can be culture development, it can be an innovation center of just how do you bring different startups or different businesses together. And so I think the approach is really just one of what are we trying to achieve, whatever that is, and then how do we think about a plan and a process that's going to enable us to do that. You know, networks, and just thinking about the networks and how are those designed? What's the exchange of value? The great thing about, you know, it's just you start to open up all these parts and pieces and ask questions, and in some cases visualize things that typically aren't. You know, like an organization, when you visualize an organization, even if you make it tangible, suddenly you are asking different types of questions and you're going to get different types of answers. And that will unlock something different and something new.
Yeah, right. Actually, I was just thinking, today I finished a project with the international team here. And I remember our first conversation we had, and you told us that you have been working also with different cultures and in different countries. So could you tell us perhaps a bit about the influence of the cultural context in design thinking and innovation projects?
Sure. So my wife and I lived in Singapore for 3 years, and through that time, I had exposure to a whole different culture, and really took away from that experience the idea that we all do come to different cultures with our own biases, our own understanding, and really understanding how do we ensure that as we enter other cultures and try to design and work in them, What are we bringing in? What's that awareness? And so we actually created a transcultural design class, sort of asking, how do you design for cultures other than your own? And I think the main component is just to realize that we do all come from different cultures. And I know that sounds really simplistic, but just recognizing our stories, our myths that we grow up in have essentially helped us problem solve and create sort of armatures of how do we solve all the challenges of the world. And this is like love, family. We've all created as societies different ways to answer these existential questions. And just knowing that as you go into a culture, realizing that you have biases and ensuring as you do that, you're connecting with local individuals that can help explain those nuances, explain those differences, and really be able to fully participate and be humble and recognize that you might not know how things operate, but you can still contribute. It's just understanding that we don't all operate in the same playbook.
This is really interesting because it's definitely many times what excites me in research is kind of breaking those bias. My own bias actually, even in topics that sometimes we feel that we have some knowledge, some base knowledge, and so on, but. That's the thing. Like when we are talking actually with people that they will bring a different perspective, right? Like and sometimes it's really it really changes the way we look into things that we just assume as they are based on our own experience, which is fair as well, right? But it always excites me also that richness from this breaking of bias and then kind of building something from that, right? Like kind of building a new perspective on that.
Not only can you be inspired by someone else's culture, and I was very much in Singapore through an architecture, I have an architecture background, through space and the view of space, I was inspired. But also to your point is like, I learned something about like, oh, maybe the way I perceive even this
exactly
is different. And that learning, opened up a new way for me to see the world and to work and to engage with others. And I think that's the beauty of this, is that it both can be inspirational, but also really help, to your point, see and work in a new way or different expectations.
Yeah, right.
Which matters a lot. Sorry again. Which matters a lot, right? Because a lot of what I also feel about design thinking is that we have the process, we have the methods, and so on. But there's a lot of things that depend on our ability to infer on things, right? So this ability to again deconstruct our thoughts or even our thinking behind certain topics or contexts. And then being able to reconstruct something new, right? It's many times where we can find the opportunity, right? That we are trying to chase, that we are trying to identify, and then we can build something from that. So
yeah. Now we are speaking about one of the principles of design thinking, which is the human-centeredness. Perhaps it would be interesting now to switch a bit to the planet-centeredness, as it is also about sustainability. How would you say organizations foster cultures that embrace the sustainable innovation through design thinking?
Yeah, and I think there's some really good conversations going on now around like life design. I know Bruce Ma has done a lot around thinking about the entire impact as designers, as organizations. What are we contributing from that larger perspective? And so it's a nice way to take a little bit of a bigger step back and see the ecosystem that we're all existing within. So still the same methods and viewpoints can be applied to that. It's just helping zoom out and really asking a larger question: is what is the role of a company and the community and the environment, and really ensuring that those are all in balance. And I think one of the components that it becomes is the larger question of I'll say rate of return, as a very business term, but it's like, how do we really think about what's that longer term cost, longer term impact that we're looking to have? And the processes, the mindsets we're talking about here today can help to create that larger picture.
Yeah. So what yeah.
Go.
What advice you would give to teams in organizations which would like to incorporate design thinking principles in their sustainability projects? How could they do that?
Yeah, I think immediately establishing number one, where that organization is in the process. So where do they want to play? I think is really critical. And how can they impact that? Depending on what type of organization, is it a product? Is it a service? Is it a social public entity?
Yeah.
And where can you actually have impact? And starting to identify the nodes. And so it's talking about almost mapping out this ecosystem and really starting to think about that. And then devising, how do I actually start to identify value and identify different ways of engaging that? How do we fund that? What are some larger funding models? Because the value creation and understanding the value stream is really important as these different players are going to be connecting to that. And there are some instances of just, there's the business component of like, am I trying to sell or buy something? But then there's also the larger benefits of a community. You can think about tourism. How do you identify all these other systems of value that can start to be designed? And business design becomes a huge component in that. So to identify that there are these other components of creating value that you can start to incorporate in the conversations and make it part of these larger value exchange picture.
Do you feel like companies are more and more aware also for these? Like, how do you see them also kind of approaching this from a product development, a business development, organizational development, and also how do you feel that that design thinking can also help to leverage that?
Yeah, I think it's they are, and I think the challenge is to identify that there actually is going to be a business if they do switch. And I know that sounds really like, oh well, but it's like a business is in the business of staying in business. And I think identifying that I think is really important, and therefore helping them understand that this is for a longer term gain for everyone, and how over time those shifts can be made to continue that value chain. And sustainability, before there was a lot around the development of EVs and mobility in general, and how do you start to think about not just a vehicle, but the ecosystem that those vehicles are going to be within. And so suddenly there were different models financially that you could go to that is just outside a internal combustion engine car.
Right.
And therefore, how do you start to identify, oh, there's actually a mobility play here, a mobility component that Ford could move into, or this entity could move into. So I think starting to identify other revenue streams can help sort of take the risk out of that, as well as the anxiety of like, wait, we might go away. It's like, oh no, you can actually just start to shift in some of these different areas and identify those.
I guess it's about the balance, isn't it? Finding the balance between the more, let us say, ecological sustainability and the economic sustainability, which perhaps is still not so clear that both is working really intimately together. And then we still have the social
exactly.
sustainability also. So this is also another kind of, I would say, responsibility, but also challenge and opportunity for companies to differentiate themselves in this.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing about this is this becomes a larger network, and therefore it's not one entity trying to do something, but as we move forward, how do we all start to connect and have codependencies, co-arrangements to be able to solve some of these challenges. in a positive way.
Right.
And also, like, within that complexity, like it for sure means, involving and interacting with much more diverse stakeholders as well. How do you see this also happen? How to manage this complexity as well within already like a complex process or project of innovation, right? So we are like, it's layers on top of layers. What are some key strategies that you normally use, or that you reckon that can help also, like, in this engagement of stakeholders and management of stakeholders for these different purposes?
Yeah, I think the first thing to recognize is managing expectations, and I think that's and the reason I say that is that rates of change operate at different components, and Stuart Brand has a really good diagram around pace layering at a societal level, and essentially he breaks this down into different layers of change: fashion, sort of what's on trend, then I think infrastructure, governance. And then you sort of get down into culture and nature, human nature. And by breaking these down and having different types of conversations, we can start to talk about different expectations of change. There are some things that we can do immediately, change easily. But as you get down into these different layers, human nature, culture, take a long time to change. They're not impermanent, but we can change them, but it's going to take longer. So I think just understanding all these different rates of change, and the nice thing is Stuart Brand talks about the top layers, the ones that sort of change quicker, get all the attention, but these bottom layers have all the power. And I think recognizing that dynamic was really helpful. So then as designers, we can look at these different layers of change and design for them. What can we do now? And that could be marketing, easy things, and then what is going to take a little bit longer, and then how do we address some of the more fundamental things that are going to take a while to shift.
Yeah, so actually we come back to the mindset. So now we not have only to foster a culture of design thinking in organizations, but also a culture which embraces sustainable innovation. So both together, which is again a challenge and an opportunity, I guess.
Definitely. And the nice thing is having that as part of your DNA, having that as part of your conversation, you're always marrying those two together and reinforcing them as you're doing your work.
Yeah, we're asking myself if there are some ethical issues, questions when we try actually to foster this change to a new approach, a new mindset, new values. It's a lot of change for organizations.
That is for sure.
Yeah, today we were speaking, I worked a bit here with academics in the new university, postdoc students. And yeah, their issue is a lot about the more emotional and also ethical concerns when people trying to embrace new methods. And I don't know if you know, but academic is very resistant to change and even to implement design thinking. And yeah, of course, I mean, academia should be part of innovation, should be perhaps even the motor, but it's not. So I don't know if you have some, because we are also in a kind of institutional academic context. Of course, Porto Business School, it has the business part and companies, and of course is much more open to innovation, but it is also an educational institution with all advantages and advantages. Do you have some experiences in this?
So I think the component to recognize right off the bat is, legacy companies or institutions that have a long history do not want to change. I mean, they've been around for a long time. I think a good example from an industry standpoint was Ford being a legacy company and just all the baggage that comes with that from a cultural standpoint. You do see that in academia. And I think it's acknowledging that legacy that is there, and then how can you start to move individuals. The other thing to acknowledge is human beings are really gnarly. Like, we have our own personal issues within. We don't like change. We don't like to give up things. So I think it's really just understanding the force at play is our species, our human species, and having different types of conversations and being able to help people see that there actually is a different way of working, that there actually is a different way of moving things forward. So I think recognizing that change management is huge. And then also the benefit of upstarts and disruptors. And how do you really identify those individuals who don't have, in case that the legacy, the baggage, and who actually can create a business model with DNA of sustainability and purpose and inclusivity. And so starting to use that as, okay, if a legacy company doesn't want, or a legacy organization doesn't want to change, how do we disrupt and support the individuals who are going to force that change and let the market sort of handle that, because it is quite quickly, once you show change and show that there is progress being made, some of those other legacy organizations will have the impetus as well to move forward.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. That's actually why I think kind of design thinking trainings for people who don't have a power of decision frequently is not very useful, because then they feel a bit without the power to implement and to really foster the change. So normally you have to get in the top management on the board, because if top management is not convinced that design thinking is a good method to foster the new culture, new approach to sustainability or social or whatever, then it's very difficult really to implement this new cultural approach.
It can be, and I think that's also just a warning, both for both parties, warning to the top levels that, hey, you are ignoring some of these things. It's at your own peril, but also a reminder to other individuals that might be lowers. It's actually our job to help those individuals see this change before it is too late. So that exchange there as well.
And picking on that, like, you know, considering like a company that wants to start like adopting, right, like, and create and build this mindset within the organization, you know, where should they start, and what to avoid, you know, what?
I think number one, start with individuals who want you to be there, who will support you. And that's an easy one, is like, go where you're welcome. Because with the critical component is you want is movement and momentum and quick wins. And so using the creative problem solving approach, solving problems, demonstrate your value through quick wins. And there are a lot of quick wins out there. It's just amazing. Opening your ears and just saying, oh, okay, how do we change something, can really provide both the examples and the evidence to have others pay attention. So I think that's really key. And then telling the story, you know, getting your message out. What are you doing, and how you did it, and showing that impact, that value impact is really key. One of the learnings I've had is just really ensuring that we're always tying these methods and these approaches and these results to impact in the organization, or impact in the company, or impact in the community. Because I think we naturally understand the larger picture, the rising tide lifts all boats. But I think really having the sense that we did X and it did this, I think it's critical to make those connections for others who are more sort of suspect of our ways of working, or more suspect of, or want to see evidence in a spreadsheet or a fact report.
So actually using our design thinking skills like storytelling, quick prototype of an action and trying it out. And I mean, this is also a challenge to us as design thinkers to use our own method, to bring this motivation for change and improvement to the organizations. Yes.
And not always use our language, but use their language.
Yes,
you know, as designers, we can sort of get in our bubble, but how are we sure that we're actually using the language of the organization so they actually know what we're talking about? in the
Absolutely.
terms, in ways that they can then champion it for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Go,
Tiago.
Katya. Yeah. No, I was just, I mean, in a previous conversation that we had, you also mentioned that you feel that innovation today is also like in a different level, right? Maybe in a different maturity level, and also what organization expect. You already mentioned some things here, but I would just like to maybe understand it a little bit better. Like, how do you see these not just the maturity of the companies, right? Like, and for instance, in Portugal, I think nowadays we see a level of maturity regarding like these topics, of course, very different from a decade ago, right? So I think more and so companies are at least aware about design thinking, although they have experimented or not or integrated, but that I believe that they are at least minimum aware and have heard about it, right? But also that's the thing, like, right, like there's new challenges, right? Context is always changing around, right? So the expectation also around innovation, and also the expectation around bringing this kind of approaches and mindset also changes according to time, right? Like, and you mentioned that the importance of kind of providing these quick wins, right? Do you think that this is also a result of how organizations also today are kind of dealing or looking to innovation?
Yeah. And I think the quick wins are just a great way of getting momentum. Like, and once you have momentum, it's so much easier to have different types of conversations. But quick wins aren't going to solve some of the challenges, the real challenges that we have. And so, but at least that will give them momentum and to make those longer term bets and those longer term conversations. But yeah, I would say like the innovation industry, there is a bit of a commodity right now of design thinking, of these skills. It is sort of a commonplace and expectations that we're going to see this. So to your point, like coming in, and saying, okay, we're using design thinking is great, but how do we actually now start to identify we're using this for critical thinking? We're also talking about it in terms of creative problem solving, really applying it to the work and demonstrating the impact that I mentioned, the value growth. And I think that terminology and that approach is really key. And we're seeing it start to blend into other practices. Lean is a really good one. You sort of comes and goes over time. But the fundamental behaviors, the mindsets of design thinking and innovation are very much in sync with these other techniques. Lean, the design thinking will help you identify where do you need to cut and what do you need to work on, and how do you actually create these projects and these problems and these things that people want. So I think the more we can just make this commonplace around how we ask questions, how we develop solutions, and how we share those, we'll just be much, much better at doing our everyday jobs. And I think that's the goal. It's not innovation, design thinking, but it's actually solving real problems and creating value for business.
Yeah. I think one of the main points which makes it companies really then take design thinking into their daily life is the power of collaboration. And what I experience when we work with design thinking, that people who are not used to work in teams, suddenly they have these kind of insight and say, oh yeah, that's so much more powerful. Let it be in sustainability projects or in other kind of projects, but they really feel together we can, we have more courage to try something new out, what we wouldn't do alone. So that's a bit my experience. That's a really powerful thing is that design thinking is based on collaboration, on sharing, on interactions, and
all those things. And it goes back to that original question you had around the culture. When we all get in a room and work together and collaborate, it does amazing things. I think one thing to recognize with collaboration, this is is that with collaboration comes debate, comes hard conversations. And I think that's where a healthy culture is really important, that It's not about just all agreeing, but how do we
Exactly.
actually use the process to help answer some of those questions? And it's
Right.
really coming together to solve for the best of the task at hand.
And sometimes it can be very frustrating, right?
And all in service of getting to that answer. Yes, totally.
But if it works, I just today had this experience that in the end of a training with really critical people, academia people are so critical on everything which is new to them. And in the end, they were so happy and recognizing certain things, the power of visualization, the power of working together, creating together. That then is really so nice for us when we feel this, that's, yeah, we got them in this.
And what's great about that is even the discussion we're having around transcultural design for other side of the world, transcultural design in your own organizations. Like an engineer thinks radically different than an architect and a finance, individuals, and using that mindset that, oh, wait, I can actually learn something by working with my colleagues is a huge, huge asset.
Exactly. You have to be open and to accept that you can learn something from the other. Actually, this is what a dialogue is about, isn't it? And in our case, a trialogue.
Yes, yes.
So, we are learning from each other, and when we speak with each other, that means that we're accepting that the other is giving us something new. So I don't know, you, Tiago, do you still have a very urgent questions? Because if not, I would say this is a really good moment to come to an end of our conversation.
I'm good. Yeah, I don't know if we have any questions from people that might be
Exactly,
watching.
yeah.
So,
Somebody from out
maybe
there.
just opening also the conversation.
Diogo, who is giving us support, is there a question coming in? I can't see any.
Why we wait for those, I think one thing that is often asked is around this discussion around human-centered design versus design thinking. And it's a very nuanced topic, but the reason I like to bring it up is that, human-centered design is truly engaging users, asking they're observing them, asking pain points, and then designing for that. I think the nice thing to remember is design thinking allows you to step back with a little bit more of awareness and bring in other techniques that designers use to explore ideas, visualization, art brainstorm. So it just gives you a little bit more license to try different techniques. And it's a nice way to think about your job is to bring in different viewpoints and different ways of seeing a problem. And that's really important. And it's not just a rule. But you can really try to explore.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. And also to reinforce that, right? Because people could have also we are, in a way, the three of us came a little bit from your architects, both me and Katya designers, right? So we are like here in a small bubble, but that's the thing, right? Like the people that can use this kind of mindset approach, they can come from any field and perspective, right? Like that was one of the things that I mostly enjoyed when I was in Berlin at the D school, was actually also to see people kind of regaining that creative confidence, right? Like like learning that they are creative as well, right? Like, but so yeah, it's not just, it has the design word in it, right? But it's more to express the way that normally designers think around problems and how to address problems.
And why we talk about methods and begin learning about them. It's really, we often would talk about not that there's a wrong way to do this. If you're curious, if you're asking questions, if you're trying to learn how someone else is using your product or learn in a different way, you're doing this and keep going. I think that might be a good way to leave this is you can't do it wrong. If you're curious and are asking the right type of questions, you're going to be well on your way of both solving the problem and solving in a way that resonates.
Exactly, because our view is not finding the only one solution, but a lot of new perspectives, and then put them in the context, and then from there choose the solution which adapts best to the context. Yeah. So I think we could come to an end then. We were speaking actually 45 minutes. I think this is a nice time frame. And I don't know about you, but I will go to a wine party now and enjoy the end of my working day.
That sounds great. That sounds
just
great.
lunch for me, so I'll wait a little bit longer.
Exactly.
So thank you very much, Lawrence, to be with us in this little dialogue.
Thank you so much.
On Three Voices. And yeah, it was a pleasure to be with both of you.
Yeah,
And
likewise.
hopefully we meet soon.
Thank you. Enjoy your wine. Yeah. And Lawrence, your lunch.
Yes, thank you. Right, take care.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.